order of business is we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I move the flag here behind me. So if we would, let's put our hands over our hearts and say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. I will move on with roll call. Mr. Antel.
Just remember you're on mute, so come off mute for your vote.
Present.
Or I can see everyone if you, or just hold your hand up. Why don't we do it that way? You don't have to unmute if you don't want to. So,
you can also
okay,
hold down the
Mr.
space
Antel, Mr.
bar.
Bartko.
I'm here.
Okay, Mrs. Miller, I see you. Okay, Mrs. Davis, I see you. Mr. Fenn,
Yeah, I'm here.
I see you, and Mr. Polyak is here. So everyone's present. The next order that we have is we're going to let Don explain a little bit about how the audience participation will work. Are you ready to do that, Don, or you want me to move to the next? Okay.
Just to make this a little bit easier. All right, thanks everybody. It looks like we have about 4 members of the public in attendance. And what I'd like to mention is that on your toolbar, you'll have an availability for a Q&A. And if you have any questions or would like to be recognized, if you would go ahead and put that information in the Q&A. If you have a question, you can put the question in. If you would like to be recognized for public participation, now is your time to go ahead and sign to, in the Q&A that would say, I would like to be recognized for the meeting. So Mayor, if you give some people a couple minutes as you take the approval of the agenda or whatever, by the time you get done, you'll be able to see if anybody needs or wants to be recognized in the Q&A.
Okay.
Question, how come I don't have a picture up there?
All right, so I am going to go ahead and go back on the agenda for a moment here, allow people in the public to have the opportunity to check in and see if they want to speak.
And I'll let you know if anybody does.
So the next order of agenda, item on the agenda is approval of tonight's agenda. And we need a motion to adopt the agenda as presented to council. So do I have someone, remember you're muted, you need to unmute and say, or just hold your hand up so I can see that. Is there someone who wants to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda as a.
Okay, Janice making a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Don,
Okay, who is seconding the motion?
can you put yours on mute? The mic might get rid of the reverberation.
Okay. So we have a motion made by Janet Miller and seconded by.
I'll
Sorry,
second
who
it.
said- Bob Bartko?
I'll second. Did you-
Okay.
Did you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Then I would say all in favor, we do a roll call vote. Mr. Antel,
Yes.
Mr. Bartko,
Yes?
Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Fenn
Yes.
and Mr. Polyak.
Yes.
Okay. Tonight's agenda is approved as presented. Do we have anyone who's asked to speak? Or should I move on, skip sort of over open forum for now and go to the minutes?
We have no one on public that's asking to participate
Okay.
in public
Well,
forum.
we'll give them a few more minutes than everyone.
Okay.
All right, we will go on to the minutes. We need to approve the minutes of the March 10th, 2020 meeting. And these were sent to you March 20th of 2020, as you should see on your agenda. So first of all, to approve those minutes, we would need someone to make a motion to approve the March 10th, 2020 minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Antel. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, that was Heather. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Mr. Antel? Do you
Yes.
approve?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Fenn?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Miller?
I abstain. I was absent.
Okay, so you're abstaining, okay. Mr. Barco?
Yes.
And Mr. Poliak?
Yes.
Okay, minutes are approved. All right, at this point then, do we have anyone who's called in or wants to speak? We do not. Okay, so we will move on with the agenda of tonight's meeting, and we'll check back a little later.
Hey, Bill, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Okay, so we're on ordinances now. The first ordinance is a third reading. It is ordinance 2020-2-7. And it is an ordinance authorizing the purchase of a new tractor and then a rear-mounted boom mower and declaring an emergency. Do I have a motion to adopt?
I'll make a motion to adopt.
Thank you, Mr. Anstel. Do we have a second on that?
I'll second.
Ron Fenn, I think, was first. Not sure, but okay, so second from Ron Fenn.
This is-
All right. Is there any discussion on this? Does everyone remember what this is?
If I could say so, I just have one question.
Okay,
Okay, in section 1, it says the cost of the tractor is $79,916 plus financing and other costs. This, roughly it's $80,000. To buy this tractor, to cut the grass, how is the grass cut before they buy this tractor? That's my question.
okay.
All
right, Bob,
Here's
let
the
me
thing
just
with the,
explain,
with the COVID-19, money is gonna be real tight, and this is $80,000. I'm just wondering how the grass was cut before they buy this tractor. That's my question.
Okay. We've gone over this several times in the first and second readings. But
Okay.
briefly, I'm going to tell you that we had a tractor purchased in 2000, 2001 that basically is only a two-wheel drive tractor. They
Okay,
get it anywhere close off the road and it gets stuck. This new
Okay.
tractor is a four-wheel drive tractor, mows the same way off the edge of the road, mows any of the big green areas that we have around Route 8. Okay, and the old tractor, we're trading in the one mower that's on there,
okay, the
on
boom.
the old tractor, and we're putting this boom mower on the back of that tractor so that we
Okay,
can mow behind guardrails. We can mow down in the other side of ditches on roadways. You know, we have roadways here, we can't mow the back of the ditch because we can't get there. The new tractor would only mow to the bottom of the ditch. This mower on the old tractor, which we haven't had a mower to do that in a while. We've used the county, we've done different things. This new mower would go on the old tractor. The old tractor is still very usable and it's been explained like this before. Charlie Riedel was in and explained it several times, at least once at a meeting that I'm aware of. So that's how it was done. And we had budgeted for this, Bob. So we do have the money ready to go for this.
Okay, I'm just asking, was this grass cut before? Like, you said
Some of
that you
it
bought a
was.
tractor in 2001, now it's 2020. Between then and now, how was the grass cut? That this
Not all
tractor's gonna cut?
Not always cut. We cut what we could reach with that present tractor that was only two-wheel drive.
Okay, and you're getting a new one.
Big dump truck.
Part of
Because
this
it's
ordinance
not
is
really
buying a new
appropriate.
one. That boom mower for the old tractor. You're buying a new
The
boom
boom-
mower
yes,
for the old
because
tractor. I
Your old
understand.
tractor, if you want to listen,
Okay, go ahead.
tractor does not need to go into the ditch because the boom mower can reach out about 14 to 16 feet. So we'll
Okay.
reach to the back side of the ditch, mow that, or we'll reach over the guardrail, mow behind that for all the areas on 303, down along Chittenden, all the places we have old 8 places to mow behind the guardrail that we have not been mowing. And now we will be able to do that.
So we haven't been mowing that grass.
No,
In all these
We
past
haven't.
years,
One-
we haven't
one year
mowed that
we-
grass.
one year we rented the county, and they came out and they mowed it, and, we chose not to do that again, for some reason, but, we could have them, they came and made 1 or 2 passes. This way, we can actually mow it when it gets to the point that we're not gonna mow it like every week or 2 weeks, but when it gets up a little bit, it's a danger for people to sight distances and that, we'll be able to mow it. Okay.
I'm just, you're buying, it's $80,000, over $80,000. And with this COVID-19, all the money's gonna be real tight. And I'm just wondering about spending $80,000 for a grass that has been cut in years gone past. And now you're gonna buy a mower to cut the grass. I understand that. I understand that this new tractor or this new mower is gonna mow the grass, but in years gone past, this grass has been cut without this mower. And I'm
No,
just
it hasn't
wondering
been
if
cut,
the
Bob.
village would spend $80,000 on this new mower just to cut the grass that's already been cut in years gone past. That's my question.
Ron Finn.
I call a question.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion made by Mr. Antel, seconded by Mr. Fenn. We'll start with Mr. Antel.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Poliak,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Bartko.
Well, everybody on council I'm going to abstain because I don't believe in buying this. I'm going to abstain.
Okay, well, as we know, the abstention goes with the majority vote, so
Right.
thank you, Mr. Bartko.
I understand.
Ordinance 2020-2-7 passes. And we will move on to the next ordinance, which is ordinance 2020-5-15, an ordinance establishing a 12-hour shift work period for non-exempt law enforcement officers and declaring an emergency.
I'll make a
This is the
motion. to
first
suspend the
reading.
rules.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Who was that? Okay, Heather seconded. Who made the motion?
Me, Ron Antal.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I have to be looking right at you to see who. Okay, thank you. All right, so We'll go ahead and take the roll call. And I know Betty probably can hear me, but I'll just continue to do it because I have the list right here. Mr. Antel,
Yes.
Mr. Barco,
Yes?
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
and Mr. Poliak.
Yes.
Okay, motion to suspend has passed. We now ask for a motion to adopt ordinance 2020-5-15.
I'll make a motion to adopt.
I'll
Okay.
second.
All right, thank you. Any discussion on this? Seeing none. Mr. Antel,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
Mr. Poliak,
Yes.
Mr. Bartko, you're muted. You need to unmute. Mr. Bartko, you need to unmute.
Okay, hang on.
Okay.
Can you
All
hear
right,
me
you're
now?
unmuted.
It
Yes.
says I was muted by the host. Can you hear me now? Can you
Yes.
hear?
Are you
Yes.
voting
I'm
on this
voting yes.
motion?
I'm voting
How
yes.
you voted on this motion?
For the 12-hour shift, I'm voting yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller. Thank you.
Thank
Okay, motion passes, becomes ordinance 2020-5-15. The next ordinance is ordinance 2020-5-16, an ordinance retroactively declaring an emergency during the current COVID-19 crisis. So I need a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule.
I so move.
Mr. Fenn,
Mr. Finn's making a motion?
and I'll
Okay.
second.
All right. Who seconded? Don? Okay. All right. We have a motion and a second to suspend. And if you want to, you can just hold your hand up if you don't.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Poliak? Okay, Mrs. Davis? Okay. Mr. Antel?
Yes.
Okay. Mrs. Miller? Yes. And Mr. Barco?
Yes.
You're unmuted, Mr. Barco. Okay,
I'm
thank you.
sorry, you keep
Hi.
muting me. Yes, I got some questions on this.
Okay. All right. All right, so the motion to suspend is carried. We now have a motion to adopt. All right, who made the motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt.
I'll second.
Thank you, Heather.
Second,
That was
Ron.
seconded by Mr. Antel. All right, any
Support.
discussion on this?
Yes, I have a few questions. I'm just reading from the
Okay.
top. It says right in the block at the top, who introduced this ordinance? It says introduced by, and it's.
This was an ordinance that was,
Is that the correct? There were 2 different versions. There was a draft version, and there was a subsequent version that
Right.
had been circulated. If you may be operating from the draft version.
No, I'm operating from the draft that I got in the envelope from the village.
Okay, I can't see that, so.
okay.
Okay,
Do
But-
you want me to read the heading?
Thank you, Janet.
A resolution retroactively, well, I've read it once, approving the permanent annual appropriation. No, that's not it. I've got the wrong one. Hold on a minute. No, an ordinance retroactively declaring an emergency during the current COVID-19 crisis. And this was something that was asked by the governor to do this, to have all communities agree to abide by the COVID-19 rulings that he has been announcing as this crisis is going on. And so to make it official, I wanted to make sure that we have this known to all of council and that they're agreeing to the fact that we need to follow the governor's rules to protect our residents.
So the governor introduced this? I'm just asking, who introduced this ordinance?
The governor asked that we
I
all
understand, but-
follow suit.
Okay, but who introduced this ordinance? That's what I'm asking.
I
That's
did.
my first question.
I did, with the
Okay.
approval of this council.
Okay, all right. My second question, maybe Marshall, if you have this in front of you, under section 3 of this ordinance, it says that during the period of emergency, which could be now or for like a year and a half, the mayor shall have the power to appoint, promote, and transfer any officer or employee of the municipality except elected officials without the further act of council. Marshall, what does this mean?
You're muted, Marshall.
I just had to find the button. So the general intent here, and this has been done in multiple different communities. The idea was, and this was drafted during what I would call the height of the COVID-19 crisis, where I would say that it was a lot less clear as to what was going on and how things were going to work out. But it's really just what the language says. It's suggested that in the event that there was a need to hire additional police officers, in the event that we had officers that were sick, or if individuals in the office, Betty, Natalie, Katie, were all sick and we needed to carry on business of the village, this gave the mayor the ability to hire them, because under our current code, the council is required to approve. So it is that particular provision allowed the mayor, for all intents and purposes, to hire emergency personnel in the event that someone was sick.
It's just for hiring people.
I'm sorry?
Correct.
According to you, it's just for hiring people during this pandemic.
Correct. That's not the only thing that's accomplished by this legislation. The main purpose of this legislation, aside from, I should say, the practical reason for this legislation, is that it allows the village to seek reimbursement from either the federal or state government for all COVID-19 related costs. When the mayor says that the governor has suggested this, the reason being is that both the federal government and, it remains to be seen what the state government has indicated that they intend to reimburse local governments for COVID-19 related costs, such that in the event that there is an emergency declaration, this was one of the ways to make sure that when we would submit that kind of paperwork, that it was officially declared to be an emergency in the village, and that we would essentially use this almost as a cover letter for those costs. But that's really the practical reason why this legislation was brought forward tonight. It was drafted probably a month or so ago in what I would call the height of the concern over COVID-19.
Right. We just haven't had an
Okay,
official
Marshall, I
meeting.
understand about getting reimbursed and everything about the COVID-19, but from what I'm not a lawyer, but from what I'm reading, it says that the mayor shall have the power without further act of council. So
During the period, read the first 4 or 5 words, Bob.
I
Say, during the period of the emergency.
which is how long?
So we need
How
to.
long is the period of emergency?
Right now, it's 90
Period of
days. It
emergency
says in
is
there.
When we
90
don't have
days.
someone to fill the position.
If I recall, Mr.
But I'm
Fenn
not
has
here
it
to argue
correctly.
with you on that.
Mr. Mayor, I think that Ron Fenn points it out that by the terms of the resolution, that it's a short-term declared state of emergency for 90 days.
Okay. So it's gonna be for 90 days. That the mayor can do whatever he wants without permission of council. That's
Well, I
what
think-
I'm reading.
Well, I think that's an overstatement, but I think what it means is that if there's a need for additional employees or substitute employees during the next 90 days, the mayor has the ability to do that. That is what that provision means.
Plus, you said that this covers other provisions.
Well,
Does it or doesn't it?
I thought we were talking about section 3, the one that you read to me about.
Right,
employees.
I did, but you also said that besides hiring people during this COVID-19 pandemic, that there be other provisions that the mayor could do without the approval of council. Is that true? You said that.
It's only,
It's recorded.
if that's what I said, that's certainly what I intended. What I was indicating was that the practical reason for the legislation was the need to have an official declaration by the village in order to recover COVID-19 related costs.
But that's not what section 3 says.
No, that's not. I think we've clarified that.
You keep repeating that to get back things from the COVID-19 crisis to for the village. But that's not what section 3 says. All right. Oh, all right. You
All
keep
right, there's another question,
all right,
Janet.
in section 4, it says that this ordinance is effective retroactively as of March 9th, 2020.
Okay.
All
I
right,
see that. I'm with you now.
Is there a
okay.
question there?
All right, Marshall and the rest of council, what has the mayor done since then? This is retroactive to March 9th. Today is May 12th. So what has been done in the meantime? That's my question. All right, I'm just making that statement. And then my other question in section 9, it's stating that wait a minute. Hang on. This ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary for the immediate preservation of public peace, health, safety, and welfare for the reason that is necessary to ensure the efficient and continuous operation of the village government during the present COVID-19 crisis, and to allow for the possibility that significant numbers of council members, us, cannot be present during the crisis. Well, we're having a virtual meeting right now. What this is saying is that, and it continues on to reduce the need for council meetings because council members can't be present. Well, if anything, it's easier for council members to attend these meetings because it's virtual.
So the provision and the language that you're reading
Right.
should be read in conjunction with section 5 that talks about having meetings and being able to permit special meetings by video or phone conference. And the intent here, what you may recall, or maybe you don't know, you're not aware, that prior to House Bill 197, which was passed by the General Assembly during this crisis, we were not permitted to have virtual meetings. We were not able to count members that appeared by a telephone or via a video conference towards quorum, and those members not present in Village Hall were not able to vote. If you take a look at our codified ordinances,
Okay, what we do now?
that law changed. It is a temporary law. It's called House Bill 197.
Okay,
And it's referenced in section 8 of the legislation as well. If I got the section here, oh, it's not. It talks about section 121.22.
right.
That's the law that was amended by House Bill 197. It's subpart C of that, which allowed for a meeting such as this to be legal. Some of the other legislation tonight has a language references specifically House Bill 197. So when this legislation was prepared initially, we were still in the throes of whether or not we were going to be able to attend meetings via teleconference or not. This legislation was prepared, I believe, in April. I think I sent the updated version to Betty on April 20th. And while House Bill 197 had been in effect at that point, the idea here was to comply with that, was to make sure that we were specifically calling that out for historical purposes, and that to the extent that anyone would ever want to argue based on our codified ordinances that meetings were specifically to be held at Village Hall, that we had suspended that requirement in this legislation, which we are able to do because we are not a charter community.
So in effect, this ordinance is outdated.
I would not say that at all.
You just did.
I said that it was prepared at a time when the legislation was, the House and the State Senate were working on this legislation. It was being formulated and discussed. We put this clause in here to make sure that it was, one, memorialized, and two, that there was not an argument ever down the line that these virtual meetings conflict with our codified ordinances. So the codified ordinances, discuss, if you look under council rules, that, council meetings shall be held on the first Tuesday and the third Tuesday of every month. They should be
Okay.
called to order at 7 o'clock. Those kinds of rules, this rule makes very crystal clear that we are permitted to meet via telephone or video conference such as this Zoom meeting.
Which we're doing tonight.
Just so that, if I may speak, just so that all of council hears this. This was done, we still were in snow season. We still need to provide police protection to this village. If our members of our police department, members of our road crew contracted the virus, they needed to be isolated for 14 days. We needed to have people that we could send out on the road for police protection. We needed to have people we could send out in plow trucks to plow the roads. So this was not an unneeded resolution, and what we're doing it because we never had a meeting prior to this one when we could vote on this. We're doing it retroactive, Bob, so that, yes, as Marshall said, the government in the State House is saying that there may be dollars available, and the federal government's also saying there may be dollars available for items that we spent for the COVID thing, like extra masks, all these things for the police department, things for the road crew, things that we spent on for this crisis that we may be able to be reimbursed for. So that is the reason we passed this, so that we're entitled to be able to apply for that, Bob. All right. Next, do you have any other questions, or can I move on to Janet, who has a question?
I just want to make one statement about this ordinance. I think this ordinance is the use of the current crisis as an excuse to get rid of the council meetings. That's my statement. Just so it's recorded. That's my opinion. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
Just so it's recorded.
Miller, I'm calling on Mrs. Miller. Go ahead.
Yes, I completely disagree with you, Bob. I think that this entire piece of legislation gives the village more flexibility. It is retroactive, So costs that we didn't know that we were going to incur, we may be able to get refunds or ask for relief because of these unprecedented, unknown times. It doesn't just cover Section 3. I might just add, and correct me if I'm mistaken. The mayor shall have the power to appoint, promote, and/or transfer any officer or employee of the municipality, except elected officials. We will not be undermined in terms of us being able to call council meetings, by the way. Extends and grants its prospective concurrence such decisions by the mayor. So now you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but we also have human beings that work in the village hall. And those human beings can become infected. They can be around people that have been infected, and they may test positive when we get testing in the hopefully soon. If they would test positive without symptoms, then they would be required to isolate and quarantine. So this gives the mayor the ability to have someone cover that person's position while they are in quarantine or while they are ill. And it is, so I mean, it isn't just the safety workers, it isn't just the police, it's also Betty and Natalie, all the workers, the people that come in and out of our building, the people that are the people that clean it, and there's I think this is a very, very well done piece of legislation. I support it, and I'm not skeptical, and I don't think you're entitled to your opinion, Mr. Barco, but I think that in the very least, for as short as it is, it does a really fine job of being very succinct. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Mayor, if I may, I just wanted to echo what Mrs. Miller was saying, and thank you for your words, Ms. Miller. Bob, the last sentence in Section 3 says that any such action shall be directly related to the village's response to the COVID-19 emergency. I think your question to me was, is it this gives the mayor the power to do whatever he wants, which is a very broad and wide open statement. What this particular section in this ordinance allows, legislation allows, is the mayor to appoint officials directly as a result of the COVID-19 response, as Mrs. Miller pointed out. This isn't the mayor can hire 14 people to fill the service department and whoever he wants. It has to be directly related to the COVID emergency, and I don't think there's any doubt that the mayor's good intentions and his track record of integrity would suggest otherwise. And I would also, to my knowledge, I'm not aware there to date being any need to actually exercise this provision in any event. So it's not as if we are hiding the P here. This still gives the mayor the ability to hire someone in the event that someone gets diagnosed with COVID-19 as we move forward. But we haven't had that need yet, and it's a very, very limited grant of power for a very limited amount of time. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Marshall. And no, we have not, I have not had a reason to hire anyone else, and we've been managing to get by. We have now a thermometer sitting here in the village hall, and as employees or anyone comes in the village hall, we take their temperature and make sure that we're playing it safe, just as we've been asked to do by Amy Acton, our medical advisor from Columbus. So we're doing those things, and so far, knock on wood, we've been staying healthy here. So thank you very much. Are there any other questions on this ordinance? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion that was motion to adopt ordinance 2020-5-16 made by Mrs. Davis, seconded by Mr. Antal. Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Antal,
Yes.
Mr. Poliak. Yes. Mr. Fenn.
Yes.
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Barco.
I know everybody has their opinion. My opinion is no.
Okay. Okay, we have that on the record. The motion has carried. Ordinance 2020-5-16 has passed. We will now move to resolutions. Resolution 2020-5-16 is a resolution approving the permanent annual appropriations number 2 for the Village of Boston Heights for the year 2020 and declaring an emergency. I first need a motion to suspend the 3-reading rule.
I'll make
So
a
moved.
motion to suspend the rules, or I'll second.
Okay. Moved by Mr. Poliak, seconded by Mr. Antel. Mr. Poliak.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Antel.
Yes.
Mr. Bartko.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
And Mr. Fenn.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. I would now ask for a motion to adopt Resolution 2020-5-16.
I'll make a motion to adopt, please.
Thank you, Janet. Have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Thank you, Heather. Discussion on this. This is our usual housekeeping for this. Mrs. Klingenberg, do you have anything that you want to add on this? No, you need to unmute.
Okay. What I wanted to say that we will probably be doing another one in the next month to 2 months because of the COVID-19. There is a reduction of income, and I will keep a close watch on that, and we'll be back to go and have an updated one for you. But
Okay.
it's too early to tell just yet.
All right. So does anyone have any questions then on the council? Either for Mrs. Klingenberg or myself.
I would just ask that we, I think all members of council, when tax collections actually start to materialize and we actually know what the actual collections are against the projected estimates are, that we're notified immediately. Because it's one way or the other, we're going to have to be able to react to that and think that through. So Betty, thank you for always doing that. But just all members of council, if we can look for that, I think it's going to be very important for us, especially this year, to look at what those collections are coming in against what the estimates are.
Can I say something at this point? Mr. Poliak,
You're still good.
You're still good.
Okay. What I want to tell you, at the first quarter of the year, very little reflects on a reduction, and that's mainly because it doesn't take effect. The next quarter, which will be up until June 30th, we will notice that there'll be more. There are some areas which I am looking at very closely. One is our municipal income tax, our gas tax. People are not driving as much. We're not getting as much money. I'm keeping a folder of everything that shows a reduction that from month to month. So I hope that by the end of the second quarter or before, I will have a bigger picture of what's going to happen so that you are up to date. I'm done.
Okay. If there are no further questions, then we have a motion to adopt Resolution 2020-5-16 made by Mrs. Miller, seconded by Mrs. Davis. I will go ahead and take roll call. Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Fenn?
Yes.
Mr. Bartko?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Poliak? Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Poliak? And Mr. Antel?
Yes.
Mr. Antel? Thank you.
Yes.
All right, motion carries, becomes resolution 2020-5-16. Next resolution is resolution 2020-5-17. It is a resolution to secure and authorize payment for property and casualty insurance for the village and declaring an emergency. I would first need to be able to discuss this, a motion to suspend the 3-reading rule.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Barco. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Antel, okay. Thank you. Mr. Barco,
Yes.
Mr. Antel,
Yes. Yes.
thank you. Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
thank you. Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
thank you. Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
okay, and Mr. Poliak.
Yes.
All right. Motion to suspend is carried. I would now ask for a motion to adopt resolution 2020-5-17.
I so move.
Adopt.
Okay, Mr. Fenn made the motion and the second.
I'll second.
Okay.
I'll
there's
second.
other- Oh, Janet, I'm sorry. I have to look for the little ring around your picture so I know who was talking. I'm sorry. Okay, if I get it confused. All right, any discussion on this one? Okay. I believe Mrs. Klingenberg has something to add to this. Are you unmuted, Mrs. Klingenberg?
I'm not sure, no, I don't think so.
Yes, you are.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay, you can hear me. I wanted to review what I sent a memo on, and that is with reference to the fact that we're going out for bid. It was brought up last year, and I wanted you
Oh,
to really understand that it does go out for bid. Our broker sends it out every year. Now, out of the ones this year, 6 insurance companies, they denied us. Now, I wanted you to be perfectly clear. They did not deny us because our claims were too high or whatever. They actually is because they could not meet the price nor the coverage. We have excellent coverage. Now, the other point that I wanted to make is for the past 6 years, our increase has gone up $2,676. That's excellent. That's not just premium increase. Actually, we've got new vehicles. We've got new road vehicles. Our inflation of our buildings that automatically goes off. I think we've been extremely lucky. And I just wanted to reiterate that before you voted for this policy. I'm done.
Can I add a comment? Bill, I think you're on mute. I just wanted to thank Betty.
okay, sorry, I'm sorry, yeah.
I just wanted to thank Betty for the thorough, the thoroughness of all this information. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And that should have been included in your packet. Has this cover sheet, but it has a lot of things from the Ohio plan and that in it. So all of you should have gotten that. Okay. Are there any other questions then on this resolution? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion made by Mr. Fenn and seconded by Mrs. Miller, correct? Mr. Fenn.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Miller,
Yes?
thank you. Mr. Antel.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Antel. Mr. Poliak,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
and Mr. Barco.
Yes.
Okay. Motion carries. Comes Resolution 2020-5-17. Next resolution is a resolution appointing Chad McCardle as police chief for the Village of Boston Heights. Need a motion to suspend the three reading rule.
I'll make a motion to suspend the three reading rule.
Thank you, Mr. Antel. Have a second?
Heather.
Thank you, Heather. Mr. Antel.
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Poliak.
Yes.
Mr. Barco.
Yes.
Okay. Mrs. Miller
Yes.
and Mr. Fenn.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries to suspend. I would now ask for a motion to adopt to consider Resolution 2020-5-18.
I make a motion to adopt.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion made by Mrs. Miller, seconded by Mr. Antel. Any discussion? Discussion was had with the Safety Committee, and this is the conclusion of that. So if there are no questions, then we'll proceed ahead with the vote. Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Antel?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Poliak,
Yes.
and Mr. Barco.
Yes.
Okay. Motion carries, becomes Resolution 2020-5-18. And as you recall, Ray Heatwall is officially done in June. We will see what everything is going on at that time. We might have some little ceremony that we can get together with more than 10 people, but maybe not. If it's 10 only, maybe we'll do it outside or something and have everyone spaced around. So I've already talked to Chad about this, and he totally understands. So that's our plan. All right, we will move ahead then with Resolution 2020-5-19, which is a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with OHM Advisors to provide construction administration inspections services for the Megan's Lane paving project, declaring an emergency. In order to get to the motion to adopt, we need a motion to suspend the three reading rule. Could I have a motion for that?
I so move.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fenn. Do we have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Mrs. Miller. And I will go ahead with the vote. Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
okay, Mr. Barco,
Yes.
okay, Mr. Poliak,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
and Mr. Antel.
Yes.
Thank you. So motion to suspend has passed. I would now ask for a motion to adopt.
I so move.
Thank you, Mr. Fenn. Do we have a motion for second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Antel, thank you. All right, any discussion on this? Seeing none, we have a
Mayor.
motion made by Mr. Fenn, seconded by Mr. Antel. Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
Mr. Antel,
Yes.
Mr. Bartko,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
and Mr. Poliak.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Becomes resolution 2020-5-19. Next resolution is resolution 2020-5-20. It is a resolution declaring it necessary to renew the tax levy at the tax rate of 0.75 mil and requesting the Summit County Fiscal Officer to certify the total current tax valuation of the village and the dollar amount of revenue that would be generated by this renewal levy and declaring an emergency, even though it doesn't say in here, this is for fire. I need a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Bartko. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Miller. All right, I will take the vote. Mr. Bartko,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Antel,
Yes.
Mr. Poliak,
Yes.
Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
and Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion to suspend is carried. Motion to adopt resolution 2020-5-20.
So move.
Adopt.
Okay, so moved and you seconded, Janet?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Fenn moved, Mrs. Miller seconded. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll take a vote.
Just before,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Poliak.
Mr. Mayor, if everybody can recall what the important significance of this mill, this particular levy is, it's really in the language. Remember, it is mainly geared towards the ambulatory equipment, provisions of ambulance, paramedic, and emergency medical services operated by the fire department. Everybody can also remember that these funds and dollars were critically used in our negotiation with the Valley Fire Department, and they're necessary for us to maintain those services that we negotiated with them for that ambulance care from our station.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Poliak. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, I have a motion by Mr. Fenn, seconded by Mrs. Miller. Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Antel,
Yes.
Mr. Poliak,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
and Mr. Bartko.
Yes.
All right. Motion carries, becomes resolution 2020-5-20. And we're coming down to the last resolution. Resolution 2020-5-21, a resolution authorizing the fiscal officer to transfer money from the TIF fund number 2903 to the general fund and declaring an emergency. I first need a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule in order to consider this. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
Okay, Heather made a motion. Do we have a second?
And I'll second it.
And Mr. Bartko is a second. Okay, I'm going to take the vote. Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Bartko,
Yes.
Mr. Antel,
Yes.
Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
and Mr. Poliak.
Yes.
Okay, Motion to suspend has passed. I would now ask for a motion to adopt Resolution 2020-5-21.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Bartko. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Fenn. I have. All right. Any discussion on this?
Is this so we can make the payment to the schools? Yeah. I'll get you on the other
All right, Mrs. Klingenberg will explain that for us.
day. Go ahead, you're on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The TIF settlement monies come in two segments, spring and fall. We received $370,000 and plus change for that. Of that money, there are treasurer's fees, which is deducted, and then there's a percentage according to the agreement. So the developer gets a certain percentage. Wait, no, I'll go back from the beginning. Hudson gets 25%, the developer gets 55%, and the village gets 20%. Now that 20% is in the, we've already sent out the other people. What I'm asking for is the opportunity to take that out of that and put it in the general fund. And that's where it should go. So I need permission from the council to do that. I'll be back to that. I will not have to back in the fall because Marshall, I think it's written in, I don't have the resolution in front of me. Is it written that it covers both payments?
Yes, it's for all disbursements during
Okay.
calendar year
So,
2020.
And so we're getting $17,301. We'll get that again the second half of the year as well.
70 cents.
I'm done.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Mrs. Klingenberg. Any other questions on this?
If I could just say one thing is that from what I understood from Betty, it was all garbled. You have like a voice echoing. Maybe if Betty closes the door, we're getting a voice echo, and it was pretty hard to understand her.
Well, maybe I can help. The idea here is that we have negotiated a TIF agreement several years ago. Each year, the developer makes pilot payments. They're called payment in lieu of taxes. Those payments come in and we put them in the fund that is referred to in the legislation. I believe it's 2193 or something to that effect. I don't have it in front of me. And according to our TIF agreement, we then take those funds, we pay the treasurer, and then we disperse the rest according to our previous agreement with the schools and the developer from several years ago. What this resolution does is it allows us to essentially pay ourselves. Money is already in the account. The money has been dispersed to the developer. The money has been dispersed to the schools. And so in order for us to use the money, we have to move it to our general fund. Otherwise, it would sit in this particular line item in the budget and can't be used for other purposes. So essentially, this is us paying ourselves after the TIF payment has been made.
Okay. Does that clear up everything for everyone? Okay. If there are no other questions, I will go to the motion made by Mr. Bartko, seconded by Mr. Fenn. And this is a vote on resolution 2020-5-21. Mr. Bartko.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Fenn.
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Polyak.
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Antel.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. That was the final resolution, 2020-5-21, and it has passed. So now we will go on to the mayor's report. I want to make note to you, everyone here at the meeting, that because Memorial Day is actually 2 weeks from yesterday, we went ahead at that time and moved the finance meeting and the council meeting that precedes it to March 19th, which is next Tuesday. I'm sorry, May 19th. That Y looks like an R. All right. So May 19th, and we will be, and Natalie will be getting out the notices again, and we'll be sending any paperwork. Betty will be getting that out to you to review as we did this. Did anyone have any problem with getting the packets? They all, I'm assuming I didn't hear anything. They all arrived, and that's good.
Mayor?
One thing we're going to do, I was going to discuss tonight a little further what our status is at the pool. If you recall and have been watching what the governor has been doing, swimming pools, whether public or private, shall be closed unless it is a swimming pool for a single household. And that has been the rule that was issued April 27th. And that's the rule we've been under. However, today mention was made that they're going to be addressing that on Thursday. And what I wanted to just prep this council for is the fact that we may not be able to open the pool or would be very late this year. And I wanted to know what your feeling was going to be. So at this point, we're not really going to take a straw vote or anything. We're going to wait till next Tuesday, because that will still give us time to decide what we're doing and, to let Hastings know one way or the other how we want to proceed with that. I've talked with Charlie, our road superintendent. There are things that he needs to do to get it prepped. We know that Hastings has things to do to get it prepped. There will be monies will have to be spent if we're going to just make sure we keep it through the summer and not open it this year. So it would be ready for next year, because we can't just pretend like it's not there for a whole year. We'd have to do some maintenance on it. So we'll need to think about that and the whole thing. So that's why I'm telling you that. I see Janet, you have a question? You're muted though.
Just
Okay.
really quickly, it's just a pre question going into having a discussion about this next week. If you could
Yes.
have some answers or some, in the event that we would not open the pool, what would be those costs? And would there be any benefit to us not having the pool open in terms of necessary repairs, or if we weren't going to be spending the money to keep it open? I know it doesn't make a profit, but maybe that's a good time to consider some of the things we couldn't address, we were trying to temporarily fix. Anyway, to see the positive in it, if it ends up being fixed.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. In talking with the road superintendent, as we know, even before I became mayor, the health department in Summit County has said that pool has issues. One of those being the fact that we don't have municipal water source. We have gone beyond that by using the well and bringing water in and doing different things. But that pool is approximately, and I can find the exact number for next week, but I'm going to say it's approximately 46 years old, which is really, Hastings has said to us, other pool companies have said to us, it's, right there at being not really able to be maintained, but we've been keeping it going. Now, if it's going to be closed for a whole year, it's something for us to think about. I know that on our master plan, we talked about doing that. We do not have the money for that. And, so that's why I want the council just to be aware of that fact that if it's going to be closed for the whole year, we're gonna have to spend some money on it that we're not gonna get any money back this year. And hopefully it would be able to be used again next year, but I haven't totally asked Hastings that question because we weren't totally sure what the ruling's gonna be. And it looks like now the ruling, it looked like, because we've been asking all the mayors and mayors meetings to the county and the state have been asking these questions. Most communities have already announced they're not opening their pools. They're not opening their playgrounds. We have our playground presently closed. Our park is open so that you can walk, enjoy that, different things like that. But, you know, the governor also said there will be some, also word on summer activities. At this point, I believe everyone in this meeting is aware of the fact that Memorial Day, there is not going to be a parade. We're not going to have the band come, mainly because the school is closed. The band is not even been practicing. I've already talked with the pastor. He's not going to be coming. The flag will be arranged for Memorial Day, and I'm hoping to get a letter out before then, a newsletter that will say to the folks that in the village, please honor your fallen veterans, honor your former, you know, your in-laws, your whoever that you may have in this cemetery or any cemetery, but, you know, please social distance and come up on your own so that we don't have a big group gathering that we might have to disperse. And we don't think that will be an issue. But that is the reason we're not having the Memorial Day service. And depending on what we hear in the next few weeks here, right now at this point, it looks as if the Fall Festival will not go forward, but we don't know that yet. I think it depends on how all that's going forward, what's happening with, you know, opening up things and how that's going to move forward. So I wanted to bring that to your attention tonight, and we will discuss the pool more next Tuesday. So remember that you'll be getting the call-in information for the virtual meeting next Tuesday at 7. That said, I'm going to ask the fiscal officer if she has a report. Are you unmuted? No.
My,
Okay, you're all right. Go ahead.
I'm okay now. Just a couple of things. One is I've already discussed the declining income. I will provide you, keep you up to date on more specifics later. But the second thing I wanted you to know, some good news among this, is the workers' compensation premium we paid this year was $12,540 some dollars. As per the government, we are actually getting that back, and I have already received that. So in essence, we paid nothing for the premium this year, which I think is some pretty good news. I'm done in case you have any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Betty. We'll move to committee reports. Safety Committee, Valley Fire District. Any report there?
Yeah, safety, we don't have anything to report unless any of the other committee members do. I do not.
Okay, and anything from Valley Fire that we know of? No? Okay. How about Roads Committee, Cemetery Trustees?
Nothing really. We talked about Memorial Day and Megan's Lane, and Brian's got a whole slate of repair work that we're going to be doing this summer, and road work, and he'll go over that.
Okay. The one thing I want to mention, I think our cemetery sexton may have gotten you the letter. He may not. He did drop it off for me. For the first quarter of this year, we had one cremation burial for Marguerite Donnelly. We had no lots or graves purchased, and we had no footers poured. And I know since this last month, we did have one footer poured for a family that's moving their loved one from another cemetery to be with the rest of the family here. So, and I'm sure you have that report though, Mr. Fenn, or someplace maybe in the file that's still here, but we'll try and get those to you so you know. But all right, so lands and buildings. Janet, do you have anything that you
You're on
have to unmute? Okay,
I have nothing to report, but I will have several questions for us about lands and buildings when we come to our work session meeting next week.
okay. All right, to the finance meeting.
And then into the economic community development portion. I'd also have some inquiries next week about, that the status and where we're at with that also. So, but I don't have
Okay.
new to report unless any of you have heard anything, interesting.
Janet, can you say that again? The status of what next week?
Where just if the status of where our economic development stands, if there's any new interests, or if we've had any, like to just update that a little bit next week.
Got it.
Okay. Anything else to be said there? If not, we'll go to
I'm
Planning
muting.
Commission BZA.
Oh.
Or, okay.
Mayor, did you want me to go, or was Janet was asking?
Oh, I don't know. I'm
believe
sorry.
She was asking if anybody has gotten any updates of any economic development activity, is what I heard.
Okay. Other than what we've heard, Janet, I haven't received anything. No new ideas have been brought in here. We know that we've had some questions on the Norwood, but nothing's been brought in. So I'm not sure what their thought. They wanted to resubmit the same plan that the owner of Norwood wanted to resubmit that, but again, nothing has been brought in, so I don't know what.
So, I mean, I can update on that. I have spoken with the folks, the attorney. In fact, I spoke with him today. He called me and indicated that the owner of the hotel wants to come back again and essentially make the same proposal that they did previously to Planning Commission about rehabbing the property, putting in offices and so on. I told him that they were, of course, free to do that. Essentially, the only difference, as I understand it, instead of two applicants being Bevan and Tapestry, the third applicant was going to be the current owner. Right? So it would be you would have, instead of two applicants, you'd have three applicants. Otherwise, I think it's the same exact proposal. There are some other things that are, but going on in the village from an economic development standpoint, but they're no different than anything that we ordinarily have. We always get calls, we always get interest. But if there's something that we're in a position to discuss and report, we'll be happy to do that.
Oh, okay, thank you, Marshall. Like I said, now, Janet, are you satisfied with your questioning? Okay, thank you. Mr. Poliak, do you have anything on the Planning Commission you want to report on?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The Planning Commission met, and they met virtually. It was our first really official virtual meeting. It went really, really well. The item on the agenda was Spirit Auto Group, and they were requesting a conditional use certificate for automobile sales and other compatible use.
Just gonna
Bill?
ask, I'm gonna interrupt really
Oh.
quick and ask Bill to,
Mute yourself when Don's talking.
yeah, Bill, if you would mute because you're echoing. Makes
Mayor,
sense?
could you mute?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you need me to mute you?
Got it.
Okay. Can you hear now okay? Is that better? All right.
That's better.
Planning Commission met and the item on the agenda was Spirit Auto Group requesting a conditional use certificate for automobile sales at 5837 Akron Cleveland Road. So it's the old, I think the John Deere building down on the more south end of town. And it was approved with some conditions of meeting things like a site map and some other various items that would have to pass through the village engineer, you know, such as like parking spaces and some of the other items. And that was the only piece of business on Planning Commission.
I can hold, I got it. All right, so that's it. Now we will go to our engineer, Brian Gorog. Brian, you're muted, so.
No. Actually, I have a number of things. Because of the COVID-19, we're seeing a lot of funding applications are going to be delayed. ODNR, the Nature Works grant that we applied for Matthew Thomas Park is going to be delayed this year. Normally it would be due June 1st. They're not going to have it this year, so we won't be able to apply until 2021. OPWC, for example, you know, we were awarded Brandywine last year. Well, typically July 1st is when they issue the letter of award. And because the state budget did not get passed in March, right now it's nothing's been official, but unofficially, that's not going to come July 1st and it's going to be delayed. I mean, we did get approved, it will happen. It's just when we'll be able to start it. Normally we'd start doing the design in July and bid it out in the winter. It's definitely getting delayed and not sure when that's going to happen. We might not get approval till the fall or winter, and we'll have to see if we're able to do, if we can't do the construction next year, it might have to be the year after. And also, you know, we have other OPWC applications that normally start coming up, and we don't have an answer to if it's going to be delayed or if I'm going to be able to apply like I normally do, which is coming up about this time of year. So that's not some of the bad news, but I understand that's what happens with going on with because of the state budget and everything else going on. This happened in 08 and 09 too, with a lot of funding applications being delayed. So hopefully we'll have more answers on that moving forward. Also too, even the Heights to Hudson Trail that we were given the award, well, we haven't gotten our official letter of award because again, that gets approved under the state budget as part of it. So, you know, we've been told we will get the money, it's just gonna be delayed. So we have a lot of delays in some of these, so we're just gonna have to wait to do anything with that. And then we have further funding applications we apply for in the fall that we'll find out if those will be delayed or if it will just be, you know, suspended for a year. So that definitely does, you know, it's just what it is. I guess some good news, about 3 weeks ago, we officially approved the Wendy's site plan. So Wendy's is good to go. I did send an email to try to figure out when they thought they'd be starting construction, but I haven't heard back yet. But I would expect something pretty soon with that you'll start seeing probably a sign and so forth that Wendy's will be under construction in Boston Heights this summer. So that's some good news with that. Boston Mills phases 3 and 4 is moving very well with everything. You know, nothing's been delayed at all. They're anticipating the project possibly getting completed without weather delays by mid to late June, with that project even being done. So they've been on track. Shelley and Sands has been doing a good job. I've talked to Robbie, our construction manager, all the time about that. So everything's moving forward with that. And then, like we said, Megan's Lane, we'll start the process now of getting bid book plans together to get that out for bid. So we can get that moving, for Megan's Lane. That's all I have. Does anyone have any questions? All right.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, they were doing milling, and I know they're hauling grindings out today on Boston Mill, so that project is moving forward. It's a good thing that for them that they can close the road, because as you know, that's a pretty narrow road, and it would be difficult for them to do a good job and get their work completed if we were trying to maintain traffic. So we do have a detour route around, and there are only 2 houses in that whole stretch. So that's the thing. And Megan's Lane, we are moving forward with that. Last year, we decided that, and the road committee was aware of the fact that there would have been so many cracks to seal that it didn't make much sense. So we saved the money to crack seal it and went ahead and said we were going to go ahead and get that paved. And so OHM has put a program together on that. Looking forward here, old business. Does anyone have any old business? No. Okay. New business?
Mayor, if I may, I would just ask the council pass a motion to move the meeting that would have been the day after Memorial Day to next Tuesday, the 19th.
We did that in the beginning, Marshall. That's been the date that we approved at the beginning of the year.
Oh, that's this traditional date? Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to make sure we pointed it out so that everyone remembered, but we knew it was the day after Memorial Day, so we didn't know if people would be out of town or whatever. So at the beginning, when Betty was looking at it, she pointed that out and said, let's go ahead and do that. And that was the schedule that was given to everyone.
Okay,
So
thank
that
you.
date's already been on there.
Good.
It now turns out to be a virtual meeting, which we didn't know at the time, but I think after this meeting tonight, we've become a little more accustomed to how this goes and the whole thing. And
Well, I was just going to say,
you want to do it virtually, Natalie can get that set up and you can go ahead and have your meeting that way. So that's the thing. So, okay.
Okay. So my question is in these virtual meetings, and this is directed towards Marshall, what you have in these virtual Zoom meetings is an ability for the public or attendees to be able to ask questions or provide comments in the Q&A. And so when there is some type of comments but aren't quite questions, I would like to know, and I think all of us on council need to kind of know how to operate within that. So, for example, tonight there was a member of the public that came in and provided a question outside of public comment. And how would you like that to be? How would you like to be that? Is it, do we speak it into the record? Do we ask the question? What are the protocols around that and the best practice? I think it'd be good for us as a council to kind of get an understanding of how to operate within that. Because right now we have an open question that's been in the Q&A for most of the meeting. And so I just want to know the best way to handle those things.
not entirely sure I understand the question. But if you're saying, how do we want to handle them? It's really up to council. The plain matter, the plain truth of the matter is that the public has a right to observe under traditional Ohio law, as well as House Bill 197. And so to the extent that we want to make the ability to participate and ask questions, it would be up to council. And if there are no rules, it's frankly, it's up to the mayor as chairman of the meeting. And typically we announce in our agenda that we have a public forum. I think it's appropriate that we still allow the questions during that time period, and just as we would in any other meeting. I'm not sure that answers your question. If a question comes in,
What happens to questions and comments that are outside that time period?
it's up to council. It's up to the mayor, or if council wants to adopt a rule on how to handle that, we can. It's completely a matter of procedure that council can decide.
Okay.
I think if we adopt it at all, a person has to identify themselves and their address. If it's a random question without a person who doesn't identify themselves, then we should ignore it.
So if you want to make a motion,
If you recall, during the open forum, which is at the beginning of the meetings, I asked several times there if there were any members of the audience that had any questions to ask. None of them did. We proceeded ahead with a little part of the meeting. I asked again. The host directed me to say that there were no questions at that time. I'm not sure when this question came in, but it is outside the realm of when the open forum is. So as we have, if this was a regular public meeting, sometimes we have people that just blurt things out in the audience, but many times we just say that you're out of order and we don't, and especially if it is not about something that is on the evening agenda. So open forum is for any of those questions that are general to the village, but once we get into the ordinances and that would be, if it pertained to that audience, that would be up to the council, as Mr. Poliak has said, to say, yeah, we will let that person speak, but.
and if you want to adopt a rule, like Mr. Ansel suggested, that you must identify yourself in order to ask a question and your address, we can make a motion to that effect now, on an ongoing basis. We could make it as a part of the rules in an ordinance at the next meeting. But for now, it would suffice to do that in a motion format if you wanted. Otherwise, like I said before, the rules are silent. It would be up to the mayor. And if anybody disagreed with that, there is if you disagree with a ruling, quote unquote ruling, that the mayor makes, as a matter of procedure, you are able to what's called appeal to the chair, which is the mayor, interestingly enough, right? And he would make a decision. He's probably going to affirm himself, and then it goes to a vote of council on a procedural vote. But depending on what the issue is, something like this, it's really just going to be up to the mayor for all practical purposes. If it's outside the rule and they don't, and we've adopted a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make the motion that if a member of the public identifies themselves and puts their address and their question in the Q&A, that it would be recognized during, or outside the public participation portion of the meeting, if it was in the time frame of the meeting. That would be the procedure of recognizing the appropriate Q&As.
Okay, do we have a second on that?
I'll second.
I have one question. Marshall, or Don, do these questions and answers get recorded? I see that they're, I don't know what it is, but do they get recorded in this meeting?
Well, and that's why I'm asking, because we can speak the questions into the meeting, into the record. And that's why I'm trying to make sure that it's appropriate when the chair recognizes it, or when it's procedurally appropriate that we recognize it for it to be in there, into the meeting. That's the purpose of my motion, so that when members of the public participate and they do mention their name and their address and put the question in, in the Q&A, even if it's outside that public participation forum, that we would then recognize it so we could speak that question into the record.
So we have to recognize them to get it recorded. Is that what you're saying?
That's how I understand it.
I don't know if we are actually recording the Zoom proceedings, if you will, like, and if that would play back in a video. We are required to, only under the law, to make minutes. Typically, we record our meetings, and that is the way that we keep our record. We actually, in addition to the recordings, we adopt written minutes. The law really only requires us to do one or the other. It doesn't prohibit us from doing both. And if we wanted to record the videos, we could have all three. So Mr. Barco, to the extent you're asking whether these questions are recorded, it would depend on whether or not it's recorded in the Zoom medium and whether or not the village is recording it. If they are, then it's recorded, I presume, but that's really more an IT question that I don't know the answer to. From a legal perspective, we don't have to record it so long as we have minutes. Hi, Carol.
Yeah, I don't think anybody has a problem reading a question if someone asks it, if we know who they are and what the question is. But if you're just going to throw out some random question, and some of these are rather immature questions that people throw out in their comments, there's no need to recognize that. If you have a valid comment and you're a resident, or even if you're not a resident, just say who you are and ask your question. No one's trying to say they can't speak and we don't want to answer their question, but just identify yourself.
I think that's right. There's case law that allows the mayor or the council president, whoever is presiding, to rule those kinds of topics, or even topics, conversations, or questions that are off topic, to be out of order, and that's perfectly appropriate. And obviously, immature questions would fit right in that category.
So is there a second? Or
Is there a second to Don's motion?
I think Mr. Fenn seconded it.
Okay, Mr. Fenn, second. Okay. So is this a motion we want to put on, we want to vote on this meeting at the end, or we want to put it on the beginning of the next meeting?
No, I think it's a
Vote on
motion.
this meeting?
That's a motion,
Okay.
right?
So we have,
I think it would be
Betty,
a-
are you getting a
I think
copy
it's
of this then?
effective going forward, right, Mayor? And that's a question, I guess, to Mr. Koliak and Mr. Fenn, but the motion is intended to be a rule going forward during virtual proceedings.
Okay,
Yes, absolutely.
okay.
I'll give it to you, Betty.
All right, so we have the motion and the second by Mr. Fenn, and then we'll go ahead. So, yeah, so what is your intention at this point, Mr. Poliak?
To vote on it right now,
Okay,
and that it would be our procedural rule for our virtual meetings. So if
Okay.
if members of the public come in and participate in the Q&A and they identify themselves, their address, then we will provide that question within the meeting.
let me get this clear then. So we have a point when we ask for questions and answers. This happens 10 minutes beyond that period. Do we still accept those questions? We're between ordinances, we're between resolutions, we're in committee reports, and we're going to take these questions then.
Well, at that
Is that, I just want to understand what you're proposing.
that's what I'm proposing. So then at least then we can speak that into the record, and you could say that's out
Okay.
of order, or that's an acceptable question, and whoever is giving that committee report could then provide context around that if a member of the public was providing that, because we do have that in our meetings sometimes. I mean, if someone's providing a road report and a member of the public then had a follow-up question on something, I think there's legitimacy to then, if a member of the public then identifies themselves, gives an address that they and I think that it just makes sense.
Are you also limiting this to 3 minutes as we do?
It would just be a question, and then you would be able to
Okay,
keep it within order, or you could discard it, and it would be your prerogative, Mayor, at that point.
okay.
But I think it would identify which questions we can take and accept and read into the meetings, and which ones we just have to then discard that they're just that answer that's potentially not part of the meeting.
Don, you're breaking up again.
I'm a little confused. May I ask a question, please? Can you hear me? The mayor asked, okay, so I feel like we're sort of, we're obviously chartering, new waters here with these meetings. At least for myself, but I mean, in terms of we collectively as a council. So ordinarily, when we have a council meeting, we have a public participation, audience participation time at the beginning of the meeting, which is what Bill just referred to as the 3-minute rule. But then we also have a whole different sort of motion, I think, going on here with questions and answers during said meeting, right? So we asked at the beginning of this meeting, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe you asked at the beginning of this meeting, was there any public participation? So my first question is, like, what would that look like? Do they come on screen then and participate, or it's just audio?
No, my motion is not to change the public participation, the 3-minute rule. That absolutely stays the same.
That's
It
it.
just
Okay.
allows that if a member of the public identifies themselves and has a legitimate follow-up question that's happening during the business of the council, if they identify themselves and give their address and ask their question, it will at least get read in, and whether the mayor recognizes it at that point or not, then it would then be put into the meeting.
Mrs. Miller, maybe you, to help provide context for this, what Don and Mr. Fenn are talking about in the Zoom platform, at the bottom of the screen, there's a little Q&A, and questions pop up there. What
Right.
he's referring to is that as long as the person has said their name and has said their address and then states a question that the mayor decides to be in order or appropriate, what Don is saying is as soon as somebody realizes that, and I don't know who we're going to task with the responsibility of seeing it and calling it out, maybe it's anyone, but somebody will pull it up, read it out loud so it's recorded on the audio recording, and then the mayor can decide whether or not we answer it, talk about it, or forget about it, because it's up to the mayor from a procedural standpoint to address the question. Don's motion is simply that it is recognized as a Q&A and read to council, up to the mayor's discretion to answer. It's not a 3-minute discussion. It's literally probably a 15-second discussion, as long as it takes to read the name, the address, and the question.
Right. And so that was my continued, my question was sort of directed to the mayor, because he said, does the 3-minute rule apply? So I just want clarity that these were talking about two separate things. The regular meetings and what you're talking about, which is the Q&A, which I do see down below. And I thank you. I hope everyone's clear on that. I understand. I got it. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Okay, so we have a proposal for a motion made by Mr. Poliak, seconded by Mr. Fenn. Could you repeat that motion, Mr. Poliak, so we can take a vote?
Mr. Pollack, I think Mr. Barco has a question.
Mr. Barco has a question.
I had a question. If a resident is attending this meeting and asking the Q&A thing, is it up to the mayor to decide if the question is raised or not? That's my question. If a resident has a question, does the question get spoken in the meeting? or not? If the mayor decides not to do that, then the question doesn't get written or spoken in the meeting and get recorded. That's my question.
I think if it's an appropriate question, it's the mayor's discretion to read it in. I don't think he's trying to hide anything. But if someone writes a question and says, why doesn't Mr. Antal get a haircut? The discretion is up to him. If it is not relevant, then he doesn't have to read that. If it relates to something, or if it's an antagonistic question, designed to provoke someone, it's to keep the meetings flowing. If a person truly has something to say, they have up to 3 minutes at the beginning of the meeting where they can bring that in. If they just think of something during the meeting, it doesn't have the same weight as the 3 minutes in the beginning where you thought about your question and you put it in. You can save that till the next meeting if you want to bring something up. But we're certainly not trying to discourage people from asking questions. But we also don't want to slow a meeting down with questions that aren't relevant or more rhetorical questions.
I guess what I'm asking is a resident attending this meeting as we're conducting this meeting and businesses taken care of, and they have a question that arises during this, they can raise they can do it in question and answer, Q&A. They wouldn't have that question at the beginning of the meeting because the meeting hasn't progressed yet. And as the meeting is progressing, they have a question. Well, a legitimate question on what we're discussing, that's all.
That's why my motion is presented, because there's been times that in a committee report that a member of the public just has a follow-up question that's a legit question, and this offers the ability for the mayor to then choose if a member, again, my motion is during our virtual meetings, a member of the public can post on the Q&A their name, their address, and their question. And we will then recognize it and read it. The mayor can then, at that moment, he can determine on whether or not that it's an acceptable question, and at that point, and recognize maybe someone who gave the committee report to follow up on it or not. That's all it is. If someone doesn't post their name, doesn't post their address, then we don't read the question because it's just someone trying to put some banter in it or put something. That's it. It's just that easy.
If a person truly has a question, this isn't the only forum they can ask that question. They can email council, they can call the mayor, they can call anybody on council to get their questions asked. So we're not limiting anybody from getting their question answered. We're just trying to make sure there's an orderly meeting.
Okay,
Let's vote.
is the discussion done? If it is, we have a motion that said we will consider questions made during the question and answer part of the meeting, and they will be given. Now, I don't see those questions here. I'm not the host necessarily. Okay, Don is acting as the host this evening, but it could be someone else. Whoever's acting as the host is going to see that question. And they could bring it to me if we're going to do that. But like I said, tonight I'm not, I don't get the question here. I might see on the bottom of the screen, as you might see, that there's, now as I'm looking, and I'm not looking at that bottom board all the time because I'm trying to run the meeting, but I can see that there's, in Q&A, there's a 1 there. That means one question was asked. That one was not there because I looked the second time that I asked if anybody had any questions, and they didn't. And that's when we had open forum. That's the point that we normally let people ask questions and they're not out of order. A lot of times they ask, we have something going on, and yeah, we do take the time to answer those questions. And if that, I think that's what Don and Ron are trying to accomplish. So in this case, I was not aware that we had a question right at that moment. on a certain question. So I don't know if getting it like if it was later in the meeting or at the end of the meeting, I don't know if that's the appropriate time to ask that question or answer that question. So, but if that's what we want to do, I will instruct whoever is hosting the meeting, say, okay, we have this, let the mayor know, tell the mayor you have a question on this particular item that's being discussed. And then we would, if we have a legitimate question from a resident or whatever, and we know who it is, we can go ahead and let them bring that forward.
Mr. Poliak, is that the intention of your motion? Okay.
Yes.
I have one question. This is a village council meeting. Don, are you the host or the mayor the host?
Right now, I'm hosting. We could, but that's mainly for us just to have training purposes of hosting so that we can get into the routine of being able to do this together. But, eventually, when people get comfortable with it, the mayor can host his own meeting Chairman Codrea at the Planning Commission asked me to make sure that I came on to host to provide access and help and assistance. And this is just one of the ways that I think that we can accomplish what we're trying to accomplish, which is if someone does have a follow-up question that's reasonable, I mean, we've always recognized that kind of in the past, and this gives us an avenue to be able to do that.
I think because someone's designated as a host under the Zoom program doesn't necessarily mean they are presiding over the meeting. You can be a host and preside, or you can be a host and not be presiding. It doesn't have a legal difference, in my opinion, as to how the meeting is conducted. The mayor still presides over all meetings. Don is just the facilitator, if you will, of the platform.
What the host does a lot of times is unmute you. And I'm not paying attention. Somebody's saying they're talking and I'm trying to figure out and write down who's made the motion, who's seconded the motion. So it's just another thing to look at. Oh, is there a question and answer? Are you unmuted? Do I have to do this? I have to go to that person and unmute them so they can talk. By having the host, you have that benefit of being able to run the meeting and have someone help you run the meeting by unmuting people so the meeting can flow. I mean, it's not very often that we have a meeting that lasts almost 2 hours. We started a few minutes after 7 and it's 5 minutes to 9. So it does take a little longer. This will get better as we go. We had a longer agenda, but so that's the thing. So right now, we have a motion on the floor made by Mr. Poliak, seconded by Mr. Fenn. I guess we'll take a roll call vote on those, the motion being that we want to allow questions and answers during the council meeting, as long as the person who's making the question identifies, or do you have that?
Yeah, here's the actual motion. During our virtual meetings, a member of the public can post on the Q&A, and they will be considered when they identify themselves, provide an address, and a question.
Okay. All right, is that good with your second, Mr. Fenn?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, so you've all heard the motion. I will go ahead and do the roll call. And I'm just going to go across the screen here. So, Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Poliak?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Antel?
Yes.
Okay, Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Bartko?
Yes.
And Mr. Fenn?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries, and it's just a motion, doesn't have any number on it, and we will implement that at the next meeting. All right, thank you. So We were going through old business and then new business. And I know of no reason for an executive session. So I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll
Thank you,
second.
Heather. Do you have a second? Janet makes a second. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign? Nobody want to say aye, aye. Okay. All right, we're adjourned. Thank you at 8:58.
Good to see everybody. Good night.
Safe.
See you later.
Bye.
Good night,
Stay healthy.
everybody.
If you want to take your temperature, we do have a device here. Oh, yeah, I'm showing it. Okay.
There you go.
I'll check you. You're on mute. Ron.
No, that's all right. I was just saying, we were hoping that was either a mouth or a head thermometer that you guys were using there at the village council. Everybody's safe.
Thank you, Ron.
Sure.
That's a no-touch thermometer. That's a no-touch thermometer.
no-touch thermometer.
Yeah. All right. Good night.
Good night.